What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel and now welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed unless, of course, your taste level is lacking. And if that's the case, I don't even know what to tell you because honestly, that is a struggle I have never in my life had to work through. But good luck. While my little two-piece is in the background sleeping and not making much noise, I'm gonna go ahead and get into the story before they get up and start throwing each other into the baseboards in the background and trying to tear each other's legs off. In September of 1978, 15-year-old Mary Vincent is living in Las Vegas, Nevada with her parents and her 6 siblings. Mary is a very bright student with a promising future. She is a competitive dancer with dreams of traveling the world performing. Unfortunately, though, her home life becomes a bit rocky when her parents decide that they no longer want to be married and enter into this nasty little divorce process. Mary reportedly begins acting out as a result of that. She's missing school. She is wearing a lot of makeup that her parents don't approve of, and her disagreements with them leads her to run away from home with her boyfriend in his car. And Mary is loving the Bonnie and Clyde lifestyle until things get a little bit too real, a little bit too much like Bonnie and Clyde, and her Clyde is arrested for essaying a girl. Alone now and not wanting to return back to her parents' home, she decides that she is going to hitchhike 400 miles to her grandfather's home in California. As most of us know, in the 70s, hitchhiking was a very common practice as a lot of people did not own cars. It was like Uber or Lyft, except you booked the ride in person, baby. The app was your thumb. Okay. Unfortunately, though, her deciding to hitchhike on this day will change the trajectory of her entire future. On September 29th, she is waiting alongside the highway hitchhiking along with a couple that she had met during one of her previous rides that are also traveling the same direction as her, when a balding middle-aged man in a blue van with tinted windows pulls over and asks Mary where she's headed. She tells the man that the 3 of them are headed toward LA, and he offers a ride as far as I-5, but says he only has room in his van for 1. Now, because the other 2 are a couple, obviously they're traveling together and Mary is traveling solo, it makes more sense for her to take the ride, and she is tired of standing out there. She takes the ride and bids farewell to her newfound friends. Mary gets into the passenger seat of the van, and as the guy pulls off and she's putting her bag behind her, she notices that despite him claiming to only have room for 1 other person in his van, aside from the 2 of them and a bag, the van is completely empty. This makes her a bit uneasy because that's weird, but even though this makes her a bit uneasy, she feels like he's a much older man. Like, worst case scenario, she has to outrun this man, right? He can't be all that dangerous. So she brushes it off and puts her seatbelt on, but it is not long before this driver makes her uneasy again when he tells her that she reminds him of her daughter, a daughter that he has around her age, but then hits on her. And that's a little strange. But then when Mary sneezes, he asks her if she's sick and then puts his hand on her neck and tells her that he is checking her temperature to see if she has a fever. Again, she's a little bit weirded out, but she's calming herself down, like maybe he's just a friendly older man. Maybe I am being paranoid. At this point, she decides to take a nap just so she can relax a bit. She is tired. But when she wakes up from her nap, she notices that they are headed toward Nevada and not LA. Now, again, that paranoia and that worry hits her, and she doesn't take it so lightly this time, okay? Mama finds a sharp stick right there on the side. She grabs that, holds it to him, and demands that he turn this thing around ASAP. This startles him, and he insists that this was an honest mistake, that he is an honest man with pure intentions, and he has no problem turning the van around. They travel a few miles in the right direction before he tells her that he needs to stop and relieve himself. He needs a good old bathroom break. And she is like, okay, that's fine, because at this point, she could also use a break to get out and stretch her legs, which is what she does as he goes off to relieve himself. And as she is bent over tying her shoe, she is hit over the head with a hammer and dragged into the back of the van where the driver proceeds to essay her. He removes all of her clothing, he bounds her wrists together, and he tells her that if she does not stop screaming, she will not make it out of there alive. Mary lays there hoping that it will all be over soon, but it is not. He keeps her there overnight and repeatedly assaults her until early the next morning. She begs him to let her go. At first, he's not really responsive to her pleas, but he becomes agitated with her after she continues to beg to be released. Agitated by her, he yells at her, "You want to be free? I'll set you free." He then grabs her and drags her from the van, holding a hatchet in his other hand, and then proceeds to hack off both of her arms from the forearm down, like right below the elbow, and then goes, "Okay, now you're free." He then pushes her down an embankment into a large concrete pipe and leaves her there and returns home. This Larry is 50-year-old Lawrence Singleton, born July 28th of 1927. Hate to do this to the Leos in Leo season, but it just happened. Now, not much is known about his early life, but we do know that he was a U.S. merchant mariner who spent most of his time at sea, drinking heavily and causing disturbances with his obnoxious behavior. Apparently, a side of him that typically only shows itself after he has had one too many drinks. Now, his first wife, Shirley, had divorced him back in 1971 after a very toxic marriage where he had the habit of drinking heavily and becoming violent. 5 years later, he had remarried, ironically, a nurse by the name of Mary. But after 2 years, their marriage also falls apart. What he had said about having a daughter her age was actually true. Him and one of his first wives had a daughter together, and his relationship with her is not all that great because Mr. Larry here does not respect women. Larry is described as having a very deep disdain for women, one that is exaggerated whenever he's had something to drink, and unfortunately his daughter is not exempt from this. Now, whether he had intentionally set out on this day to do what he has done to this Mary is unclear, but he leaves her there confident that even if she is found, it'll be difficult for them to identify her without her hands. Now, this is what he thought, not what I think. Fading in and out of consciousness, Mary fights to stay awake. She packs mud and dirt over her wounds in an effort to stop the bleeding. And once she is able to get a little bit of control over that, she proceeds to crawl up the 30-foot drop. She then travels down the road holding both of her arms upright so that she does not bleed out. She is so relieved when she finally runs into a car with 2 men inside, but the driver of this car quickly speeds off because he is frightened by the sight of her. She is forced to continue on, hoping that she runs into another car and hopefully they're willing to help her. And she ends up traveling a total of 3 whole miles from the spot that she had been dropped to the second car that actually does stop and offer her help. The young couple that stops drives her to the nearest hospital, and she is finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, believing that her nightmare is over. But unbeknownst to her, her nightmare is just beginning. Mary provides authorities a description of Larry that is so detailed that almost immediately after they post it to the public, one of his neighbors calls up the hotline, baby, wanting that reward money in exchange for his address. They go around to his house and arrest him and, of course, charge him for the horrific things that he had done to Mary. And in court, he admits that his goal was to kill her. He was actually shocked she had survived and basically thought he covered his tracks with the removal of her hands. During his trial, Mary takes the stand. She gives a very heartfelt testimony and victim impact statement. And as she leaves the stand, he looks directly at her and says, "I'll finish this job if it takes me the rest of my life." Now, you know what's crazy? During this time, the maximum penalty that Larry can receive for what he had done, even admitting that he had attempted to take this lady's life is 14 years in prison. And that is what he is sentenced to once they find him guilty. Now, Mary had to undergo intense medical treatment, obviously. And it wasn't just her injury. She had lost a lot of blood, and the little blood she had left was very compromised. She is fitted with prosthetic arms. She undergoes a lot of physical therapy, which takes years, during which she also undergoes a lot of psychotherapy to help her cope with the trauma she had experienced, because that is a lot, okay? And Mary really tries to move forward with her life, but she isn't all that confident that she'll ever go on to live a completely normal life as if none of this ever happened. But she definitely does try. She gets married and has 2 children, but then divorced. Unfortunately, dealing with this trauma really does affect every aspect of her life and all of her relationships. It plagues her to the point that it begins to manifest in her dreams. She has nightmares where she wakes up so startled and like shaken up that she has broken bones and dislocated her shoulder from waking up so frightened and trying to rush and get out of bed. And with his short sentence and his very sinister promise, there is not enough therapy in the world, child. Not for me. Meanwhile, Larry is living out every one of his days in prison as a model inmate, applying for parole year after year until finally in 1987, a little over 8 years into his sentence, his request for parole is granted and he is released for good behavior. Mary had always dreaded this day and she knew it was coming, but she never could have predicted that it would come this soon. Now that he is free, her fear intensifies. She is having more frequent nightmares, and of course she is worried that Larry is about to come follow up on this promise, and she doesn't know if he plans to do it now or if he wants to wait a couple of years or a couple of months. Like, she has no idea when he will strike. Now, his early release sparks a lot of public outrage. People were pissed and felt like, for one, his initial sentence was a slap in the face, and 2, nobody wants him living by them. The locals all want him gone, and everywhere he goes, people make it known. A car dealer even offers him $5,000 to leave the state and never return. Now, this was $5,000 back in 1987, so maybe it ain't $5,000 if you catch my drift. Someone even tosses a homemade explosive toward his home, and it detonates on the property. Nobody is hurt, but the message is still very loud and clear. And at this point, authorities decide to place him in protective custody until his parole expires. Once it does, with the message very clear that nobody wants him around, he decides to relocate to his hometown of Tampa, Florida. Peace was not an option for him in California, not anymore. And he figures, why not switch up the whole identity? Like, new place, new me. When he gets to Florida, he starts going by the name Bill as opposed to Larry or Lawrence. But despite his new name, he is still up to his same old foolishness. On February 19th, he invites 31-year-old Roxanne to his home with a promise to pay to play. Not long after her arrival, a house painter who is at one of the neighbors' home hears Roxanne screaming for help and goes to check it out. Through the window, he sees Larry completely unclothed and covered in blood, standing over Roxanne, who is motionless and lying on the couch. Larry is in a complete blind rage, stabbing her over and over. He had finally fulfilled the promise that he had made to Mary of finishing the job. All these years, she had taken that as a direct threat, but no, he did not necessarily mean her. He simply meant that the first time there was a survivor, and he will be sure that the second time around there will not be. The painter rushes to call 911, and when they arrive, Larry is still walking around the house naked. It is very apparent to them that the young mother of 3 is beyond saving, which is unfortunate. When they ask Larry what had happened, he tells them that he had agreed to pay her $20 for an adult exchange, but their meeting had quickly turned violent when Roxanne demanded more money after the fact, and he had refused to give it to her, at which point she decided to take it from his wallet. According to him, he says that the 2 of them struggled for possession of the wallet before she picked up the knife and got cut up in the struggle. Now, of course, the police don't want to hear that. They basically tell Larry, baby, go get dressed for jail, okay? Of course, news of this travels fast and completely dominates headlines. And for his trial, Mary travels all the way to Florida to testify against him yet again to make sure that the jury knows just how much of a monster he truly is. And she is, of course, extremely happy to do it on behalf of his latest victim, Roxanne, who unfortunately cannot speak for herself. At the conclusion of this trial, he is again found guilty, but this time his sentence will not be as lenient. This time, Larry is sentenced to death, but before he can be assigned an execution date, child, he dies in prison 3 days after Christmas in 2001 at the tender age of 74. And for the first time since she was 15 years old, Mary Vincent is able to somewhat live in peace and not have this fear lingering that one day he'll show up for her. Lawrence Singleton single-handedly changed the laws in California for those who commit violent crimes. They ended up drafting the Singleton bill, which prevents the early release of offenders who commit these violent crimes. And there is also a law that makes kidnapping with the intent of committing a sex crime on top of it punishable by life in prison. Eventually, Mary founded the Mary Vincent Foundation to help survivors of violent crimes, and she's also discovered her love of art. According to her, she could not draw a straight line even with a ruler, child, before this whole thing happened with Larry. But something in her woke up afterward, she says, that made her interested in drawing, and art for her has served as a great coping mechanism. She could not afford to upgrade her prosthetics to make it easier for her to draw, so she actually upgraded and jazzed them up on her own with a few spare parts, giving herself a wider range of motion, which I think is pretty cool. And Mama can draw too, child. She can draw better than me, and I ain't got no prosthetics. Much of her art displays powerful women as these action figures, and it's quite cool. She also said that his death did not grant her the peace that she imagined that she would have. Like, it would be like complete ultimate peace, and she would be completely free of the situation. That didn't happen, but she's gotten close enough. And she also got to see the relief and the change in her children, because of course they were also worried as well that this man was coming for their mama. I also think it's fair to mention, I did see an article where she was quoted saying that although most sources say that she was rebelling, she ran away from home to be with a boy, lived in his car for a while until he went to jail and then went to her grandfather's, she says that she did not leave home with a boy or about a boy at all, that her parents were abusive and that that's what she was running from, that her sister had told her she was in trouble and that dad was coming home that day and he was really mad at her. And she says that is what drove her to run away to her grandfather's house, and it wasn't with a boy and she had no boyfriend. So I just want to throw that out there. I feel like that's fair to mention. And that is pretty much it for this video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Don't forget to like the video before you leave. Subscribe if you have not. Share this video with a friend. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace. Unfortunately, though, things change a bit for her once her Unfortunately, though, we not doing that this video. And why is my lighting not light from that? So I just want to film the video and go back. The rest of the van, aside from them, is complete. What did I say, aside or side? Bella, yo licking in the background really is throwing me off. And walks down the rural road. Y'all know I can't say, why I always put rural in there, girl, and I can't say it. Now I just said it right. But when I need to say it right, I can't say it right. Rural. That second R is not, it's just not happening. It's you snoring in the background so hard for me. That's crazy. Like, what are you back there doing in your dream? Mary is fitted with a prosthetic. No, she is not fitted with, I was about to say a prosthetic leg. Why would she need a prosthetic leg? Why? Don't you start back there. She is fitted for a prosthetic. I was about to say prosthetic leg again. On September. What is September? September. Feb. People who have been arrested before, how long do they give y'all? Because when I tell you I will be getting dressed so slow, like I'm telling you, it would definitely be giving first day of school vibes, baby. I'm getting dressed so slow. Much of our art displays powerful women at women. Take me serious. As always, I hope. What do I hope? Because I don't usually hope anything. What I'm talking about is always hope.